Welcome to this week's GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike tech and maintenance related questions. This week I'm joined by Mark from GTN, and we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Mark, over to you for the first question.
Okay, first one from Flojo1. Hi all, I have permanently ruined my brand new Shimano 105 chain when I degreased it for the first time. I put it in ultrasonic bath for too long and with too concentrated Fenwick's degreaser solution. I thought that the brown material that was coming out of the chain was packing grease, but it turned out to be rust being created. Has my cleaning attempt damaged the Siltec surface treatment or done any other damage? The chain is no longer silver but dark grey.
Well, there's a couple of things I think we need to unpick here. One, you should never use any powerful cleaners or degreasers in a stronger concentration than what they recommend, or for a longer duration. It's an important rule to follow.
How long was he running this ultrasonic bath?
Also, I don't believe, the last time I checked, rust could form on anything without the presence of oxygen.
Yeah, I was about to say that. If it's submerged, I don't...
So what I think is happening, there is a chance that you could have caused some damage to that Siltec surface treatment on the chain, which is potentially maybe one of the reasons it's looked to have gone slightly dull. But I don't think there's any reason to not use that chain. It's just not going to be quite as shiny as it would have been. I
have to be honest, it's not something I've ever come across before, but now I'm actually interested and I might just run an ultrasonic bath with very concentrated liquid for a period of time.
Also, this is the beauty of the comments section. If you have experienced this problem, get involved in the comments section, help each other out.
Cool.
Right, next question is from MGGW. They say, how can I stop the tools that I carry on my bike from corroding? I keep them in a bidon style carrier rather than a saddlebag, and I think this keeps out the worst of the moisture. Well, the advice I would say would be put them in a small little food bag or a plastic bag, fold the end over, and they'll keep all the moisture out. Job done.
Yeah, nice and simple.
You could also use a generic maintenance spray on the metal tools to stop them corroding as well.
Yeah, and they'll be slipping out of your hands when you're trying to use them.
So slippery. Right, over to you.
All right, Mr. E331, how's everyone doing?
Great.
Pretty good, actually, thanks. Winter's upon us, and my cycling jacket, which has about 4 or 5 seasons on it, it has developed an unpleasant BO smell in the armpit area.
Oh, no.
Any tips or suggestions to eliminate it, or is it simply time to retire my beloved Castelli Alpha Rolls jacket?
Well, so this is a common problem that happens with cycling kit, right? Typically because the materials and the construction of lots of sports clothing says that you have to wash it at lower temperatures, otherwise you can damage it. You wash at lower temperatures, it doesn't kill the bacteria, and it's the bacteria which is causing that BO smell. So what I would advise doing would be finding some specific sports laundry detergent that's got antibacterial properties in it and is designed to work at those lower temperatures. Over to you.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say for some jackets, in particular more I'm thinking waterproof jackets, you probably want to avoid washing those, and quite often what I do is just like rinse them down if I get rid of mud on them with some cold water. And they can also kind of collect a bit of a BO smell over time because they're never actually properly being washed. But what you can do if you've never done it before, if you're trying to wash like any waterproof jacket, use something like Nick Wax, which is kind of a technical washing detergent that also waterproofs the garment. Okay. But again, it's really important you don't put on a warm wash, but you can still clean it.
Okay, so a couple of options there. And if that doesn't work, well, it's going to be time to bust out a new jacket.
All right, next one from Candid 3000. I have a question. If I was to spend a certain amount of money on a road bike, let's say £7,000, does it really matter in terms of quality what brand I choose? If it's one of the big major brands such as Cannondale, Trek, Specialized, Bianchi, Villiers, Aubert, Canyon, Pinera, they all have bikes at roughly this price point and they're all equipped with similar bike parts components. So can I just let my taste and bike geometry decide, or are there quality differences between the manufacturers?
Well, I think this is a really interesting question, and I like the way they've specifically addressed it in terms of quality. So the difference in quality between all of these brands is going to be negligible, right? They've all been making bikes for a very long time. They're all very experienced and knowledgeable at doing it. And when you boil down the difference between different brands and remove the components like that the manufacturers aren't making, so you're really only looking at the frame and the forks, sometimes the handlebars, there is a small difference between it, but it's minuscule. You've got to just choose what kind of bike you like the look of most, what bike do you feel comfortable on, what suits your geometry and riding style, and ultimately I would say choose a bike that is going to make you want to go out and ride it more.
Yeah, I couldn't really argue with that. I mean, if you compare some of these big major brands versus maybe a smaller, lesser known brand, you'll typically see the bigger brands maybe charging a little bit more comparatively for those bikes.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
But I think with that, you potentially do get slightly higher quality.
Yeah.
But it's a hard one to kind of analyse, isn't it? Because with these smaller brands, the tooling costs per bike comparatively is a lot higher. So the margins they're making are a lot smaller, I would say. But yeah, I reckon the difference is probably quite negligible, really, between.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Also, this is a great point of having local bike shops, right? You can go, you can look at the product, perhaps even test ride it, see what bike suits you, and get some independent information about it.
Yeah.
Cool, right. Next question is from Wahoo. They say, hey, beautiful people, does carbon stiffness in your shoes lessen with time or use? Is there such a thing as the life of shoes from a carbon stiffness point of view? At which point is it beneficial to get a new pair? Wow, I didn't know this was a thing people were thinking about. Where do we start?
Well, I'm going to say no. I just don't think it would. But what do you think?
What my head wants to tell me is that, like any kind of item or product, over time, it will have a little bit more give to it and the material will maybe soften slightly. But I think we're talking in such a small little difference here. I don't think it's making any difference that would be noticeable out on the bike. And I think if you're at the stage that the sole of your shoe has become flexible, well, the shoe is probably so old that it's maybe time to get a new one anyway.
Yeah, I just think kind of, if you actually look at the thickness of that carbon that they're using on the sole of the shoe, it's really thick. I mean, there's very little flex, if at all, happening through that. It's not like a carbon running shoe where actually the carbon plate is flexing on every strike of the foot. So obviously that's stress, repeated movement. Yes, you can imagine that sort of deteriorating with time. But I mean, I don't think my carbon soled shoe even moves at all. So.
Yeah, well, I think the force, the way your foot works and the way that your pedal stroke is, the force isn't being transferred through the sole of the shoe to the bike. It's mostly being done. The shoe is just supporting your foot.
Yeah.
All right, there you go, cleared that. Okay, right, next question.
Okay, next from Rodorado 201. Hey, where should you check the chain? Above the chain stays or below?
It doesn't matter if you ask me. Above, below, round the side, do whatever you like. I think the most important thing when using a chain checker is, one, to use it correctly, and then also measure the chain a couple of different points around the full length of it.
In the derailleur?
You're not in the derailleur. That's going to be tricky to measure.
All right.
But yeah, it doesn't specifically matter above or below the chain state. You use the tool correctly.
Yeah, nice. All right, last question then from Anonymous Family 1.
Interesting.
Yeah. Does Wahoo have a feature for odometer reading like a vehicle? Like if I want to know my total mileage for the year? This is interesting.
Yes, it does. But I had to do some research on this because it's not a feature that in the Wahoo app for me was turned on automatically. So I had to go into the statistics and stats section at the bottom of the app, scroll into the settings, go all the way down to the bottom, and there's a toggle switch to turn total odometer on and off.
What was yours?
14,874 kilometres.
Not bad going.
Not bad.
That's not. So what you say is not necessarily on the computer, but it's in the app.
It's whatever rides you have logged within the app. So it could be across different devices, is the important thing. And crucially, if you're lucky enough to have different bikes, it will be logged across different bikes. So not a great way of monitoring the distance on different bikes' equipment.
Yeah, interesting.
There you go. Right, that was it for this week's GCN Tech Clinic. Hope that has answered your questions as best as possible. I say it every week. If we didn't answer your question, I'm incredibly sorry, but be persistent and put it in the comments section down below. Right, Mark, we're out of it, right?
Yeah, leave them. Use the hashtag AskGCNTech.
It's the first time we've fist bumped at the end of a Tech Clinic.